welcome to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly show, all about the news bubbling here in Brussels and across the continent. My name is Maeve McMahon. Thank you so much for joining us for this special elections edition, broadcasting from the Microsoft Technology Centre in the heart of Brussels. And thank you so much to our live audience for being here. Coming up this week, time is up. In a couple of days, European elections will be taking place, which means political campaigning will have to wrap up. With so much at stake for the continent right now, we're asking, will people go and vote, and which way they will sway? And in a couple of weeks, around 720 brand new MEPs will be walking around Brussels and Strasbourg. As they tuck into their goodie bags and their induction courses, we're also asking, will they bring bags of vision, or will they stick to the political jockeying of the past? A warm welcome to our guests this weekend. We have Samira Rafaela, outgoing Dutch MEP from Renew Europe, Dara Murphy, Vice President of Rasmussen Global, and back in 2019 known for being the Director of the European People's Party campaign, Philip Schulmeister, current Director of the European Parliament's campaign for these European Parliament elections, and Shada Islam, Director of New Horizons Project. So lovely to have you all with us. So, here we are, literally on the eve of those elections. Dara, what's your take? Has the campaign been a success?
Has it been a very successful campaign? To be blunt, I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, some of the political families haven't sufficiently embraced the so-called and badly named Spitzencandidate process.
Which we will come back to a little bit later.
Which we can come back to, with the exception, I think, to be fair, of Ursula von der Leyen, who has led out. But I think the other parties have let her on her own and haven't engaged in the campaign sufficiently.
But Samira, at the end of the day, the European elections are essentially 27 national elections. So how can you even raise awareness about such an event?
Raising awareness about the importance of the European elections, the European Parliament and the EU institutions in general is a long-term project, I would say. The challenge here is to translate our work into the value for our citizens. I do see that it becomes more and more popular, especially among the youth, and I do think the European Parliament and the other EU institutions are targeting it very well now. But more needs to be done, and the responsibility is also, of course, also with the members of European Parliament to make it attractive politics.
A bit of a pat on the back there from Samira Rafaela for yourself, Philip Schulmeister, and of course your team. It's just about 2 years now that you've been working on this campaign. Do you think it was a success? Will it increase voter turnout this time around?
I think the main thing that we're seeing over these past, and I go back further than 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years, is the increasing awareness of people that what happens in Brussels, what is decided in Brussels, has an impact on their life. I truly believe that that was already impactful on the turnout in 2019, and it will be again so in 2024. So, am I happy with the campaign we are running as an institution, as the European Parliament so far? Yes, very much so. There is nearly not a single topic that can be discussed without Europe being present. So, that has an impact on what we'll see now.
But Shada, what we're also seeing, though, in a lot of EU member states, these European elections are almost like a round two for the national elections. And many, of course, using this as an opportunity to use it as a protest vote, really thinking about national issues.
Absolutely. And, you know, I do agree with Philip that it's been a more skillful and more sophisticated campaign this time around. A bit of bland stuff going on there as well, but I like the fact that they brought in some older people, older generation, to talk about the real values of Europe. But I have to say, Maeve, the far right is using it, as you said, for national gains, right? And also, of course, very much for the European Parliament gains and other EU institutions as well. And I find that progressive politicians haven't played the same game. They're getting fire in their belly now. I've heard some of their making some, good comments and, making me sit up, right, and take notice. But they've left it a little bit too late. So let's see how it goes.
But Shada Islam, you alluded to the clip, that 4-minute clip that the European Parliament, of course, have been playing and broadcasting all across the continent. Have people in the room seen that clip? Yeah? Did you like it? Yeah? Great. Getting lots of thumbs up in the room. Philip, voter turnout back in 2019 was just 1 in 2 of us went to vote. And I've seen polls that say that will increase. There is more interest out there. but are you confident it will?
First of all, 2019 was the first year ever in European elections where the turnout increased. It was a story of decrease from 79 to 2014, down to 42.6%. 2019, we had the 8% jump, which I believe had a lot to do with what I said before. People start feeling more and more the impact on Europe, on their lives. And the same picture we are seeing this time now. Now, it's very difficult to project turnout concretely, but from all the data that we are having, Eurobarometer, all other data points, I'm confident that more people will go to vote than back in 2019, yes.
Would you agree with that?
The campaign in 2019 in general, I do found it more dynamic. And in a way, I don't see the same dynamic as I saw in 2019. And I think that really has to do also with the lack of diversity and diverse representation. Even the mandate 2019 was already special in that regard. I mean, I was only the first Dutch MEP with Afro-Caribbean roots elected in 2019. If I look at the lists now, I don't think we are going to see a lot of colour, for example.
But we wanted to find out whether people here in Belgium are planning to vote with their head or their heart next weekend. So we took a drive outside the city of Brussels and visited East Flanders to ask them. Take a listen.
It's with my heart that I vote. Yeah, with my heart, not with my mind.
Denk met mijn hoofd.
Something has to change. But I don't know which party represents the changes that I want to see. But I want to see change.
I really don't care. They always talk and they always do nothing, and I don't see any change. So for me it's all, I just vote what my mother votes. I always listen to mommy.
It's all the same. Promises, promises, and they don't do nothing.
I'm going to vote for the far-right Vlaams Belang. The rest is worthless. During these times, we better go out and vote. Otherwise, other people will choose for you. And they don't always choose correctly. It's better to vote yourself.
The voices of locals there in the towns of Aalst and Ninove, just a short drive from Brussels. Some there quoting your very campaign, which I'm sure brought a smile to your face. But others saying that politicians promise, and don't deliver. Darren Murphy, can you resonate with that message?
I can, and I mean, you know, I've been in a number of national elections myself as a candidate, and the reality is that people need to be motivated to vote on polling day. Okay, Belgium is an exception where you must vote, but in the vast majority of countries, you know, people have to decide to vote. And I think, you know, in the main, usually people will vote because they're worried about their communities, themselves, their families and their future. I don't personally have an issue that people also will vote on member state issues because we are a collection of 27 member states. But I believe the gap is closing. I think more and more.
Would you agree with that? And can you resonate what you've seen as well in that clip?
Yes, I can resonate. And it's the very reason why I myself started an own initiative, Europe to the Street. I've launched it in May. Well, it says it literally. I want to bring the European politics back to citizens, to make them understand what we are doing. And another thing about fear. Yeah, I understand the fear because, you know, if you look at the last 5 years, what happened in the European Parliament, a lot of false information was spread in so many areas.
But Shada, on that topic of fear, I was reading a piece that you had out this week saying that you're terrified by these elections.
Well, yeah, my heart says, you know, why would I be voting in a situation where I know the far right is going to increase its power and influence both inside government and outside it? So that's my heart saying. And then my head says, well, if you don't vote, that's a vote, you know, for that, you know, that will increase it. So there's a duality in me, a complexity. But one of the reasons, if I may, is that we in this EU Brussels so white, Samira made reference to it, we're really disconnected in many ways from the reality of not just brown and black people in Europe, but real people in Europe. So let's not forget that the Parliament, for all the good it does, has also been doing some really strange things in terms of nepotism, corruption. I mean, we're talking about Qatargate, you talked about disinformation. And people aren't, you know, they're not ignorant of it. They know all of this. So really we need to have a system where politicians have the trust and confidence of their people. So I think there's a real question of moral authority of our politicians that comes into play.
But in the meantime, I'll bring back to Philip Schulmeister. How do you feel when you see respondents like that say, I'm going to vote with my mom?
I wouldn't necessarily call this herd mentality. I'm following my mother in quite a lot of things over my life, and she has taught me quite a lot of things in my life. So there is per se nothing bad about that one. I'm happy that people are actually going to vote. So I think we have come a long way, that we are debating now European topics. And it's okay. I mean, I think our campaign is very much based on the idea that actually my grandparents, our grandparents, have something to tell us which is worthwhile, which has very much to do with democracy and why we should vote. So if the young guy says he's going to vote with his mother, so be it.
Yeah. Now, we do have a question there in the audience, so if somebody would kindly bring the microphone to that gentleman, and you can just introduce yourself as well and address the question.
Yes, hello. I'm Andre. I work for an European NGO on the field of diversity. And my question goes back a bit to the conversation on reaching voters. We talked a lot about reaching young voters, but what is the European Parliament and candidates and national parties doing to reach marginalized communities that are also citizens of Europe and that are also deserving to be heard and to vote?
Let's put that question. Thank you. Great question.
Thank you for that.
And very brave, being the first question in the room, so we thank you for that.
So the thing is, at the moment, and I really appreciate your question, there are two things happening. First of all, young people are going to be voting, and we don't know which way. We know that they do vote far right. So what have you been doing to convince them? And if I may say so, many of our conservative politicians have actually embraced the rhetoric and the policies of the far right, extreme right, hard right, conservative right, whatever you want to call it. So that is one reason that many of us of color are really not interested in this. We don't see representation. Samira, you're leaving. Many others will not be coming in, you know, so we don't see that representation. Representation matters. If you are a young, you know, dynamic person of color, you go to the national elections, you go to the regional elections, and you don't think of Brussels because Brussels really doesn't have that connection, that emotive connection that you need with people, whether they're black, brown, or white. And that, I think, has to change. And that's why the populists, I'm sorry to say, Dara, the populists do it in a fashion that I find abhorrent, obviously, but they are clever at that. And our progressive politicians, even the conservative ones, don't have that magic appeal, that charisma. As I said, you suddenly see fire in the belly. Frans Timmermans, well, why were you sleeping on the job? Why didn't you wake up earlier? Nicola Schmidt, now you're talking. Now you're talking. You know, so we need to do that. Our politicians need to get some, I don't know, some oomph into them. And please don't say, thank you. No, seriously.
It is a challenge to get oomph, though, when sometimes in some conversations some of the established politicians are kind of the only adults in the room and they actually have to make the hard decisions. I agree with you're saying to a point, but I do think that it really is the face-to-face contact on the ground in local communities, you know, where you talk to people, you listen to people.
Town hall meetings.
And unfortunately, 720 MEPs, given the size of the continent, it's far too few.
May I jump here in with one remark? We are presenting the whole thing as if there is the herd of voters or non-voters on the one hand and the politicians, which are too few possibly to cover the whole European Union, on the other hand. I mean, this is not what democracy is about. Democracy basically, I think it means the rule of the people, and it also means to a certain degree the voice of the people. And if you say, where is this issue? I've never seen that many civil society organizations, associations, on a pan-European level, to a national level, to a regional level, standing up and joining the conversations on their topic. Guys, this is actually also your duty at the end of the day. Your duty is not only to go to vote. Your duty is to raise issues, to raise topics, to make politicians reply to that one, to have the conversation. That is part of democracy. And we cannot always say, why haven't I ever heard about this? If you haven't asked the question loud and clearly throughout the whole time. It's part of our common responsibility that we have.
Can I just come in for a second? Philip, you know, there was a convention on the future of Europe?
Yes.
Right. Tell me more about that one day. I mean, yes, people were involved, really seriously involved. What happened to all that?
And obviously that project just disappeared.
That's it.
But just one point on psychology we're kind of fascinated with as well, and what's going on in our brains when we actually go and vote. So we caught up with one neuroscientist from the University of Ghent, Emily Kaspar, to ask her that question. Take a listen.
When we vote, our brain processes information that are based on political factors, socioeconomic factors, cultural or historical factors. But our decisions are also very emotional, and the voting brain is also an emotional brain. We are surrounded by elements that triggers activity in brain regions associated with fear or anxiety, such as climate changes, wars or populism. But when we make a decision, the brain also computes emotional information, such as the faces of the candidates. Does this person appear trustful or not? For instance, we will also make our decisions based on others, based on our family, friends or peers. And that's also why a lot of political parties are very present on social medias, because they know that humans have a tendency to conform to others. And this is also why we are requested to vote in separate booths.
So Professor Emily Casper there from the University of Ghent, with her take, what would you say to that, Samira?
I can completely understand what she's saying, of course. I mean, at the end, you need to make your campaign and your narratives and your communication relatable. But it also needs to be genuine, you know? I think a mistake that a lot of political parties make is that at a certain point they see it just as this thing they just need to do, and they don't think along, and they don't think wisely on what exactly are the needs in society to be translated into campaign priorities. I think if we want to make sure that European politics and politics in general is becoming more attractive to people, then we as politicians and legislators also need to become more normal. It's a matter of fundamental rights, human rights, and it's a matter of democracy in 2024 to still look like this. That's I think, very bad. And, you know, speaking about established politicians, I also think, I remember it very well, when I entered the European Parliament, I was one of the youngest. I mean, I was only 30 years old. And I entered and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? Because I don't see a lot of people looking like me. The European Parliament is full of established politicians, and a lot of them don't want to make space. Like they live and die in the European Parliament, and that also needs to change. We need a new generation, a fresh generation coming in also.
And Samira, is that why you're leaving politics?
I have several reasons to leave politics, but on a serious note, it has been tough for me as a young woman of color in this parliament, I must say. I mean, it's been a fight. It was a marathon. And I'm like, okay, I've been the first now. I hope that I have inspired now a new generation.
Here at Euronews, we've been doing our research, and we joined up with Ipsos to have a poll carried out on our behalf to see how that European Parliament potentially could look in a couple of weeks when those 720 MEPs move in. And as you can see there, EPP still staying strong, Greens set to lose a lot of seats, Social and Democrats set to get around 135, and all eyes on the European People's Party as well to see who they will cosy up to, because we know Giorgia Meloni now, she's kind of in between Marine Le Pen, who's been trying to court her, and of course Ursula von der Leyen and the EPP.
Yeah, I mean, you can't read too much into opinion polls, but they tend to be reasonably accurate over the last 2 or 3 elections. I mean, to the point about change in the Parliament, though, the European Parliament has the biggest change of any Parliament. More than half of the MEPs won't come back. And I think you will see a new Instagram, TikTok generation of MEPs coming in. So I think, you know, there is a view that it's the same old characters, and maybe the political groupings need to look at the top positions within their groupings and say maybe we should incorporate more of the new people.
Oh, this is not about the new generation only sitting on Instagram or TikTok. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, by the way, but this is also about the new generation of politicians just doing things differently. And, you know, being close to the citizens, close to people, and just having another way of doing politics. So it's also about the mindset, the attitude and the approach that is being meant with the new generation.
If I could come in, maybe. I don't see a difference between this, you know, what we're going to be voting for, and Dara, if we're going to have this huge sort of right-wing majority, you know, with the flirtation going on between the different women, Meloni, von der Leyen, Le Pen, so it's all our feminist Europe at its best, right? Not. So that's going to be happening. What happens to, you know, the progressives? What happens to ordinary people, when they're watching, our Europe is changing. As we look at it, on our watch, our Europe is changing. So I think our progressive politicians have abdicated, and there's a disconnect, really strong disconnect. Samira, you are an exception, really. What, 3% of our 120 parliamentarians are of color? I mean, seriously? Is this the Europe? We don't look like Europe.
We can bring in now some questions from the audience. Just introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Andrea. I work in the public affairs sector here in Brussels, and I think one of the key issues, of course, is the identity, what it means to be European. After 8 years in Brussels, I can say I feel European. But in your view, what does it mean for the people who always lived in the same country to really feel European, and how can the election try to bridge this gap?
So how to create a real European identity. And we have a question there. Another question there?
Yes, hello, I'm Matteo Albani. I work in a consultancy. About the far right and the rise of the far right, isn't the cordon sanitaire rhetoric a bit too old-fashioned? I mean, if the far right is growing, shouldn't we allow them to govern and to be the majority of the parliament?
Great question. Thank you so much, Matteo, and thank you for your question as well.
No, I don't. To go to the second question first. The great success of the European Union is the centre has held. You know, and I think, as Ursula put it recently, to be pro-European, to be pro-rule of law, and to be pro-Ukraine, those are the criteria. And unfortunately, we now have a growing number of people likely to be elected into the Parliament who do not fit 1, 2 or 3 of all of those criteria. And there is a responsibility on everybody else, and there is no question the European People's Party is being attacked on the left and it's being attacked on the right, by the right for being too left and by the left for being too right-wing. But the reality is this alliance has worked. And if you look at the education systems, the health systems, you know, our social market economy, our rule of law, Europe is working, but it needs to do far more for our citizens. I would rather be European than live anywhere else in the world. And that's not a complacency, but it's a very good starting point. And our Parliament will have to hold its nerve to do a deal and represent the people of the continent of Europe.
Thank you, Dara. And who wants to take the...
But Dara, that's really interesting. So these are the new criteria that have come in, right? I would say...
I wouldn't say they're new.
Well, they're new in the sense that I thought that being against racism, not spreading hate and disseminating hate, not using abrasive, corrosive rhetoric, not espousing the far right's ideas about some humans being inferior to others. I thought those were our values. So I believe very much that we're really letting them get away.
And but those are the European values I'm referring to. And in fact,
where did you say racism?
I said pro-European values, and I would very strongly believe that it is a European value not to be racist.
But in practice? Excuse me.
Well, speaking of values on identity, let's bring in Samira, perhaps, if you could respond to the other question.
I mean, before you can speak about the European identity, people really need to feel it. And then we need to succeed also in translating the results to people, like showing and explaining what the added value has been of our work. And then after that, you can have the conversation on, okay, how can we speak and you know, build this European identity? And what the far-right parties are doing is breaking down that identity. They don't want a European identity. The new strategy of the far-right now is to not talk about Brexit, Nexit, or whatever. They put exit everywhere. And then they stay in now. Their strategy is they want to stay in, and then from the inside, they sabotage, they undermine, they break it down. That's the new strategy.
Okay. And for women as well, so break down all our commitments to gender equality as well. It's not just about racism. It's also gender equality, which I think is very important for many of us in this room.
Yeah.
And on that very interesting conclusion, we can wrap this part. But stay with us, because after the break, we'll be going back to the future to break down what the incoming European Commission could look like. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for being with us. And along with our guests, Shada Islam, Philip Schulmeister, Dara Murphy and Samira Rafaela, we're taking a look at what this town and as well this continent could look like in a couple of weeks after those European elections. Now, earlier we spoke about potential members of the European Parliament and how the European Parliament could look. But don't forget, we will also have 26 new commissioners moving into town. A new Commission President, a new head of the European Council, and also an EU Foreign Affairs Chief. So let's cut to the chase here. Who do you think, Shada Islam, should be the next President of the European Commission?
The person who gets the most votes. Oh, sorry, wrong country. It's not going to happen. It's not about who gets the most votes. Qualified? No, it's not about qualification either, is it? So we've got all kinds of European value criteria. Look, I haven't made up my mind. I don't find anyone here at the moment inspiring enough for me to say my vote doesn't matter in that sense, right? So this is the kind of paradox, the irony of Europe. But I hope a nice person. I hope they're good. And I hope they're moral. I hope they're moral, and their moral compass is on the right side.
Samira, you're leaving politics, so you can be very honest. Who do you think should lead the European Commission?
I'm always very honest, by the way. I think that's also the reason why I got into a lot of trouble with politics. But I mean, there's no telling, obviously, yet. I mean, we see the polls. But what I find so important is that if you want to make sure that people are interested in European politics, then make sure that the political group, for example, that has been campaigning with a certain person or candidate is also the one, for example, that's going to become the elected president of the European Commission. And I think now already you can hear about certain deals that will be made. And that happened also in 2019. And I was very allergic to that because I was like, so what did we do the campaign for? If we have showed all these faces to citizens and then we come up suddenly with someone else.
And indeed, just to rewind people's memories back, Dara Murphy, you remember well, it was Manfred Weber, your former boss, the head of the European People's Party now, who should essentially have become the European Commission President. How did he feel about that?
Well, I mean, the reality of it is he ran an excellent campaign, as, by the way,
Well, you directed it. You're going to say that.
Well, of course, and we won the most seats, which was nice, and we may do so as well in the future. But I think, to be fair, two of the other lead candidates, including from your own group, Samira, ended up being executive vice presidents. In Timmermans and Vestager. And the principle, as you rightly said, the most votes still applied. The EPP had the most seats in the Parliament. Ursula von der Leyen became the Commission President. On this occasion, the criteria I would point to most, and I think there's only one person who is running. I know the Liberals, I think, have 3 candidates, so it's hard for you to suggest
it makes it very confusing, indeed.
Is the word record. And I think here Ursula von der Leyen, through COVID, through the war in Ukraine, how she initially handled Brexit, and especially what she did on environmental measures, is the only politician who's campaigning on her record.
And just, of course, here in this room, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the Spitzenkandidat process and the faces that we've seen as well that linked to the political parties. But just in case people at home are not yet, because as we've said, it's a confusing process. That we could perhaps debate all night. But at Euronews here, we've been speaking to a lot of those candidates and we've been asking them what they would actually focus on if they were in the hot seat. Take a listen.
If I am the next president of the European Commission, I will propose a number of defence projects of common European interest.
This is the right moment for social democracy to head the Commission after such a long period.
Security of Europe, the economic situation in Europe, and the question of how the stability of questions of human rights.
We have to, as a European Union, make what we have put on paper when it comes to climate neutrality a reality today.
People have to have affordable housing. We need investment in the green transition.
Our group believes in national sovereignty, and we fundamentally believe that foreign affairs is something that should be decided nationally and not be a coup d'etat from the European Union.
So a glimpse there of some of the lead candidates. Philip, does this process make your job at promoting the European Parliament elections easier?
It doesn't make it more complicated, put it like that. The lead candidate process is something that has an impact on how people make up their mind. Is it the one driving thing. No, it's not. It's not yet, but it could be.
Let's take the temperature here in the room. Do you have a question on it there at the back? Yeah, come on in.
Darren Ennis, I work for a pan-European telecom operator, but I was actually an advisor in the first cabinet of the first High Representative. We do already have a Defence Commissioner. The High Representative is the High Representative for Security and Defence and Foreign Policy. But it's quite ironic that 10 years ago, if we talked about defence and security, we would have been shut down by member states. We convened the defence ministers, but it was an informal. So I'm quite curious because we're seeing security defence really top, I think, of the polls in terms of issues. And I'm interested in the view of the panel in terms of how do they see now this talk of a defence commissioner versus obviously the EU High Representative, which obviously is covered in the treaty and exists.
Great question, Darren Ennis. Thank you so much for that. And I was going to ask our panellists as well about this. You know, what should be the mantra as well of the upcoming commission? Samira, can we get your answer to that question first?
This is why I think sometimes it goes wrong in the whole discussion on how are we going to make European politics more attractive for citizens. I mean, we speak about the very big, important topics. Yes, defense, security, that's all important, yes. But one of the most important topics to solve is social economic security for people. How are we going to deliver for the daily lives of people and our vulnerable communities in society? So with my security background, yes, I'm all for it. I understand defense. I understand security. I understand how important it is from a geopolitical perspective that we have a view on that. And the problem with these topics is that we constantly remain on an abstract level. What is defense? What is security? Security is also economic security. It's also social security. And we need to make sure that we make it more concrete so that we can make the topic, but also the debate itself, more impactful. Okay, let's see what happens after the elections. I think it also depends on what the outcome is of the elections. We have so many other topics where we need to deliver, I'd say, a commissioner. Defense, we're going to be all right.
What's your take, Shada?
Well, I mean, I do agree with you that we have a high representative and security is there also in the remit, you know, what they have to do. But I agree with Samira. Look, if we make defense the be-all of our being, you know, it is going to cut away into all kinds of our budgetary, you know, on climate, on, you know, anti-austerity measures, on education, on health. So if we can make sure that all of that side of things, which are European values, are not cut back because we're spending all our money, all our interests, everyone's talking about defense. I mean, where do people go now? The real danger, friends, today is not that we'll have a defense commissioner. Fine, you know, if he has or they have sort of like, you know, boundary on what they can do and can't do, etc. Fine, right. But what are we going to do with this equality agenda? We need a vice president who kicks ass, excuse my language. We need a vice president who deals with equality, gender equality, racial equality, disabilities, everything you like. And we may not, if the far right wins and sends its commissioners to the commission.
That's certainly not a priority of any summit
We may
I've
not
covered.
even have a commissioner for equality. It's a real serious danger.
Politely disagree with both of you. I think all of these issues are of course critical, and no one is saying we shouldn't, you know, have equality commissioners. But I do think we have neglected security in this continent. We have and defence, and it's time we changed. And our role within NATO is diminishing. The reality for us as Europeans, we must be able to defend ourselves, and we must take proper care of security. Unfortunately, across the Atlantic, we may have a president who washes his hands of protecting the European Union. So we have to step up. It is wrong to say, in my view, if we defend ourselves, if we have security, then we're neglecting other issues. That is not the case. Well, we must work not to do it.
Philip Schulmeister.
There is not necessarily contradiction here.
No.
And I come back to what you said before. Climate change. You said solar panels might not be the hot topic for everyone because some people are just caring about something else, about the livelihood, about social equality, about housing. I can translate the same topic to security and defense. I'm looking at everything that we know from, again, Eurobarometer data when it comes to what different people in different countries are interested in, what they're worried about, what they think should be a priority. And the more I look to Middle Eastern European countries, to countries bordering the conflicts on the war zone, the higher security and defense is on the agenda there. So I think, yes, that is a topic that will accompany us over the next 5 years.
Not all of these issues are European competences.
And the EU
Foreign
can often...
policy, defence, these are member states. They must give more collective power to our institutions. Trade, competition, environment. Okay, they are European competences. So it's very harsh, I think, to be too critical of what's coming from the Commission when big member states in particular, you know, let's name Germany and France, they want to keep all foreign policy.
But we heard last week
the Weimar, or the Chancellor.
The reinvigorated Weimar triangle got together last week, the foreign ministers from France, Germany and Poland, and they were actually saying, let's give more powers to the EU Perm Rep so we have a more functioning, a more effective foreign policy in Europe. Samira, has Europe been thinking too much perhaps like a peace project and not enough like a power?
If we want to make sure that we keep and maintain security in the world, then the international community cannot continue to fail when it comes to holding countries accountable when they breach seriously the international humanitarian law. Look what's happening now with Palestine and Gaza.
So that very much depends on who we all vote for and who gets those jobs.
Well, not only that. It's about our credibility.
Absolutely.
If we want to be a successful peace project, if we want to talk security, if we want to make sure that we don't have any more wars or conflicts near our continent or on our continent, then we need to act consistently now towards other conflicts too.
And on that point, we have some questions coming in from the audience that we can bring in. We have a lady there in the front. Anyone else, just raise your hand and we shall bring the microphone to you.
I'm Carlotta from a civil society organization. What about really engaging with citizens, with civil society at large, in also discussing what are the needs, what is the program for the next Commission?
What do you think about that, Philip?
I think the European Parliament is already engaging with civil society organizations on a very, very intensive basis for many years. I would love to see the Commission follow suit and do maybe a little bit more than just stakeholder consultations. I know they're doing more than just stakeholder consultations, but I think the European Parliament can here be, to a certain degree, a role model also for other institutions. Constant dialogue, and not only election-related dialogue, but constant dialogue with civil society organizations, with the civil society is absolutely crucial in order to keep European democracy really alive.
And Shada Islam, what about the idea of a citizens' assembly?
Well, I think it's very important to hear the voices because, you know, this could be the case, and I'm sure it is in the European Parliament, but in our national capitals, shrinking space for civil society is a reality in many, many parts of the world, many, many parts of Europe. And this has to be taken into account, which is why it's very, very important that we listen. Now, I've been told by civil society friends of mine, representatives, that they have never, ever, ever had a meeting with the European Commission President. Never. She has never met civil society representatives. Other commissioners have, not all of them, but that makes that, you know, we're talking constantly to business. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we need to talk to people's representatives, civil society actors as well.
And if
that's not happening, then we're really losing a very important channel of communication.
And every meeting tends to be very staged and organised.
That's right. I've taken part in many of them, so they are staged and managed. But, you know, there are voices there that are still heard.
If you look at France and Germany, Emmanuel Macron's party is set not to do very well in the elections. The Socialists in Germany are set not to do very well. Who has vision to keep that project alive?
People. We do. I think we need to keep this alive, and it'll have to come collectively from the people. Seriously.
Well, I think in the absence of a strong presence from Paris and a weakening presence in Paris and a very much weakening presence now in Berlin, all the more reason that we stick with Ursula von der Leyen. Nobody could have predicted the series of crises Europe was inflicted with: the COVID crisis, the war in Ukraine. Some may have predicted, but nonetheless it wasn't expected. And yet she managed to negotiate recovery and resilience funds,
Do you agree, Samira, or what would be your
forth.
dream scenario? Who would you like to see take up those seats?
One thing I learned in politics is you're going a dangerous way if you think it depends on only one person. I mean, this is what is going wrong in politics in general. There's no hero. There is no. Now, indeed.
But people not need a hero.
People, well, they need role models that are putting themselves out there and that lead the way and that are brave. Yes, but at the end, have vision. But at the end, it needs to be a collective of people feeling part of the solution, civil society organization included, indeed, different communities, different politicians, different political parties, different leaders. And it needs to be a collective responsibility so that we make sure it is a representative way of doing politics.
Maeve's question was who should be in charge, and there needs to be someone, unfortunately, at the top. I fully agree there has to be many people involved, but ultimately a campaign has to be about who should be in charge. Europe needs one person at the top of a pyramid, as I've said, and for me, Ursula von der Leyen is the only one any of the political families have put forward as potential candidates.
We have a number of questions. We'll need to do it with others.
She will. Fully agree with that. She will.
Hey, let's bring in, we have audience questions at the back and one at the front, so we'll take them all.
My name is Silvia Pastorelli. I'm a climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace. You just said we need to do it with others. And I've heard a few calls for civil society to be more present in the debate now, present in the next 5 years. And we want citizens to engage, but we also see that their interest and the space for their interest to be represented is very narrow, is very often tokenistic, as we've said. These meetings are staged. How do we protect our institutions? How do we protect the Parliament, the Commission, and so on from interest of powerful companies? I work on climate and energy. Fossil fuel companies are very present. Their lobbies are very present in Brussels. How do we protect it? How do we protect the conflict of interest in our
Thanks
institutions?
for your question, Sylvia. Perfect. So how do we protect our institutions from external influences? I'd like to hear.
Transparency. Transparency, which is something that, yes, in the course of the one or the other scandal that happened, but the Parliament has been working on now since over the past 1-2 years, trying to increase transparency, trying to increase openness when it comes to with whom members meet, with whom what Parliament is doing.
WhatsApp. I mean, WhatsApp messages disappear mysteriously and magically. So transparency to what point, right?
You need a bit of a spanking tool, no? Some serious sanctions that work. A code of conduct that is not just light and fluffy. But let's bring in, we have another question here in the front, and we have another question back there, and another there. People are getting really into it now.
Thank you very much for the debate so far. I just want to go back to the point of equal partners, equal bodies. Council, Parliament and Commission are not equal in all of this. Unfortunately, in many negotiations, we see when the European in the plenary, when files are adopted, the people in the Parliament are happy, cheerful, they've achieved something. We never see this from Council. And here, I just wanted to know how you assess the situation of the power balance. Because there is effectively a big imbalance from my point of view. And don't we have to fix that?
Samir, you want to take that?
Yes, I mean, the imbalance is obviously there, but this is why, I mean, another topic that is so much important, but I don't think that's very attractive for the elections to speak about, is reforming the European Parliament. I mean, the European Parliament needs to have stronger democratic control, also the right to initiative, for example. And yes, that's what I have seen in practice, you know, even if we would like to ask a commissioner for a plenary sitting or a hearing, for example, then they won't even bother, or some of them will not even participate, even though I know that many of the commissioners work very hard, because we have some of them that are very, very good. With the Council, yes, it's the same. So the only answer to that on the longer term is reforming, and especially with the European Parliament, but also the decision-making in the Council. So get rid of the veto, for example. I mean, that's ridiculous that we're still having a veto, because it's absolutely not working for so many of the files that we need to decide on.
But just to the question from Greenpeace, if I may, within the question, I think there's a significant danger. We are starting to overly, in my view, and you have to remember the workers, people who are working within these industries. There is nothing wrong with industry presenting its case to the political classes. We need to protect Europe's industrial base, and we need proper, strong engagement between business, industry and politicians. I fully agree, in an absolutely transparent fashion. But I do think there is a danger, particularly on the left, where we are lurching into a industry bad. The solutions we need to transition towards renewable energy will be with these very same companies that were producing pollutants in the past.
Thanks, sir. I'm going to bring in
Gonçalo Carriço, working in public policy in the private sector. We have been discussing here already for an hour, and I feel that there's a negative tone in all these discussions. It's important to realize what Europe brings to us. And what are the benefits of being European? I'm a Portuguese citizen. Nobody stopped me in the Spanish or the French border to arrive here in Belgium. I have a work permit. I can work here. My studies are recognized. I can use the euro to pay everywhere. I can go and make phone calls everywhere with the roaming. So are we forgetting what the benefits of Europe are in terms of explaining that to citizens and bringing some hope to them? So my question is, how to bring some hope to Europeans? Maybe that's what's lacking. Thank you.
What a perfect question to conclude this conversation. How can we bring hope, Shada Islam?
That is, for me, the fascination of Europe. That is what makes us different. We have different centers of power. We do not need, Dara, this magic person at the top. We have people, we're different from the rest of the world. We are having these conversations, and you're so right, that many people in many parts of the world will not be able to have. So there is absolutely that. But what I fear, and I'm being very frank with you, is that we've reached a point of complacency and smugness. And we lecture the rest of the world on values and European way of life and the rest of it. And we forget how some of our policies are not that. We do not walk that talk, and we preach to the others. So my point is, we are, and we have good values. Let's practice them, because the world is not blind or deaf. The criticism that we're bringing to the table is to make it better, and not to try and imitate or emulate the American system. You know, who speaks for Europe? Well, we all do. And there are different centers of power that do so.
Philip Schulmeister, are we too comfortable in this town? And how can we offer hope to people on the eve of these massive European elections?
I don't think that we have arrived at the point of smugness. I don't. I truly believe, and again, if I'm looking at our own video that you brought in at the beginning, at our campaign video, there is a message, a very strong message of hope in there. Everything that you said, thank you very much for that one, because indeed, that is far too rarely mentioned in as similar strong voice as many of the other points that we have raised tonight. So thank you very much for that.
Dara Murphy, is the time for business as usual over, and how can you offer hope to people, briefly?
Of course, it's over. Elections can never be about campaigning for the status quo. I think politicians always have to show progress and move forward. I fully agree. We have so many positive stories to tell in Europe, but equally, people have concerns and they have fears. I believe we need someone at the top. I think it is a collective between the institutions. Our 27 member states are so different, but there has to be somebody on top. And I am
final
optimistic
word with Samira Rafaela.
And in your opinion, that must be von der Leyen, right?
We all know Dara's opinion.
Well, the Liberals have Goldie, they have Valerie Hare,
yes.
and you have three to pick from.
We have the wonderful
and you have two presidents.
Yes. I'm very proud of that. Yeah. So, quickly, on hope, the only way we can give hope to citizens is that we show results. You can find it a negative tone. I find it a realistic tone. It's also very part of our duty, especially as politicians, to have a realistic debate. We cannot always sell these very, indeed, the concrete examples that you mentioned, we can sell that. But it goes beyond that. This is the privilege that we have, that we can be satisfied with that story. Many people in society, and that's the reason why I became a politician, cannot be satisfied only with that story because they don't have these privileges. So it's not about having a negative tone, I believe. It's about having a realistic tone. And yes, we offer people hope if we show results and truly deliver for people, because they're not buying it anymore. We need to deliver, and this is where you give hope, I believe.
Thank you so much, Samira Rafaela. Dara Murphy, thank you so much as well for being here. Philip Schulmeister, Shada Islam, and thank you so much as well to our audience who've been with us and for all your questions. And thanks, of course, to our regulars here on Euronews for being with us tonight. Next weekend, we won't have a show for you because we do not, of course, want to sway your vote. But we will be live on Euronews on Sunday night, the 9th of June, for 6 or 7 hours. So tune in as we break down all those elections coming in. If you've any comments or you want to reach out to us here, brusselsmylove@euronews.com is our email address. You can also reach out to us on social media, direct message us. We will get back to you. Take care and see you soon.